Memory layer. Layer lowdown. Sometimes things aren't always as glamorous as they appear. This is true for one of my biggest savant-like skills. This also talks about the price I have to pay because of that skill. Another important piece of this layer is the fact that sometimes individuals with autism don't always handle situations according to social norms, and although it may be important to correct that, it is also important to be understanding of that as well. This layer also describes certain things individuals with autism need to do regularly to help them function throughout the day and feel comfortable. Into the layer. Probably one of the biggest things that come from my savant skills is my acute memory. Not only can I remember the days of the week of the dates on the calendar, I can also remember many things about the days. For example, if someone asked me what happened on Tuesday, December 4th, 2018, I can easily state that I went to work at my job at Giant Steps. That day, one of my coworkers was absent, but it didn't stop there. That day, I was wearing a dark gray V-neck sweater and khaki pants. One of my bosses was wearing a yellow company logo t-shirt and light gray jeans. Yes, I can remember not only what I was wearing on most days within a reasonable time span, but I can also remember to an extent what other people were wearing as well. Let's just get this out of the way. People are sometimes creeped out by that. But then again, many are fascinated. I remembered what one of my bosses wore on Tuesday, May 29th, 2018. And she was shocked as she thought back and realized that she did in fact wear that outfit that I stated she wore. I did the same for my sister and remembered what she wore on Monday, October 25th, 2010. As far as the creepy factor goes, I don't do it on purpose. It's just how my mind works. For many of the people in my life, I can often remember what they are wearing. Like I said before, clothes are very important for me. I have a very strict dress code that I am very particular about how I match outfits. One of my strict rules that I mentioned in my last book is that I don't wear dark colored pants. I just never felt comfortable in them. Again, I don't know why. It's just how I am. The only time I can make exceptions is if I'm doing an event that requires dark bottom attire, such as a funeral. As far as pants go, I wear medium blue jeans, light blue jeans, gray, green, brown, khaki, and anything along those lines. I don't wear any of the newer trouser colors such as maroon or salmon. And I only wear blue bottoms and jeans. The same mindset applies to dress pants. Shirts that I wear are more flexible in terms of colors, but I generally have a gap between when I wear shirts. On average, the gap is between 2 to 4 months. Yes, I have that many shirts. My savant-like memory skill serves me well in terms of helping me remember when I wore a shirt and if it follows my gap rule. I think the past 7 years, I messed up on keeping track the gap about 3 or 4 times. Also in general, unlike the pants, when I wear a darker colored shirt, I usually feel more confident. Like I stated before, I do not know why, it's just the way I am. My memory does not just stop at what people were wearing. It also works for events that take place on certain days, as stated before. I can remember events that happened on specific days to a fault. It's basically to the point where I relive those dates. For example, on Thursday, June 23rd, 2022, I woke up and wore a green and white striped polo shirt with beige khaki flat front shorts. I spent the first several hours that morning doing a summer school college course online via Zoom. Our professor was constantly reminding us about a big project that was due the following Sunday. Seriously, I think my project was like 10 pages, and we had only 5 days to do it. After this, I went to my second job at Sylvan Learning Center to work as a tutor. 2 days prior, I remember telling my boss that the 2 students he had scheduled to work with me at 6 p.m. would not be a good pairing because of their behavior. He agreed with me and separated them for the day of the 23rd. On this day, he was wearing a black Sylvan shirt and khaki pants. I then went home where my mother had prepared a special pork dinner for me that evening, as my birthday was just a few days before. We had a grand time, along with my father. After that, both my parents had a happy birthday cake celebration with me. Here's the thing. Other than the birthday celebration on that evening, it was a pretty normal day. Nothing significant happened. Nothing at all. Most people wouldn't remember the vast majority of the stuff I've described. However, with the way my mind works, remembering all these events and details is just part of who I am. Most people envy these savant-like skills, especially the memory one. They wish they had the ability to have such a sharp memory. People will tell me things like, you have a superpower, or I wish I could remember things the way you do. It certainly has its rewards. I do love being able to remember the names of musical sounds. I do love being able to analyze numbers in such unique ways. And it can definitely be exhilarating when I get to wow people with my memory skills. But if I'm being honest, there are times I wish I could flush my savant skills down the toilet. Because as cool as they are also a major burden and a curse. Even though it may be cool at times to remember the things that I do, it can be an excruciatingly painful experience. This applies specifically to my memory of events. Sure, I remember and relive a lot of good times, but I also relive the bad times as well. Oftentimes, the bad times occur more frequently than the good times. I'm gonna tell you a story right now. Normally when I tell this story, it brings tears to my eyes. Because it was the most difficult thing I ever had to deal with. The thing is, for most people, this probably wouldn't have been anywhere near as difficult or extreme to handle. That's actually the issue. But I will get more in depth with that part in a later layer. Now back to the story. In 2015, I was working on my associates at a junior college. At that time, I didn't really have any friends. There were a few students from high school that I kept in touch with, but a true friendship was never established. In one of my math classes, there was a student I'll refer to as Mitch. Mitch, much like myself, had an interest in working with individuals with special needs. He also seemed like just a genuinely nice person. We started seeing each other in the school tutoring center and would work together from time to time on spontaneous occasions. We started to get to know each other better. I started to feel more confident, and eventually I worked up the courage to ask him something that most people would easily be able to do. I asked him if he wanted to meet to study for the upcoming math finals, which took every bit of courage I had. He gladly said yes, which prompted me to propose exchanging numbers so we could set a specific time. That day, which was Tuesday, December 8th, 2015, I felt the best I'd felt in quite a while. In my mind, not only was I starting to make a friend, I was doing it naturally. In my past, I was used to having friendships made by having an adult talk to a group of kids and trying to put us together. Needless to say, those didn't work. Even the kids from high school that I kept in touch with connected with me through the school social worker. When Mitch and I studied, we had opportunities for great conversation, and I actually didn't feel nervous when talking to him. We talked about our goals, what we do for work. On Thursday, December 10th, 2015, when we were walking to class, I had the perfect opportunity to tell him that I was on the spectrum. Another way of saying I had autism. Because he was talking about how he works with individuals with autism. But I chose not to because I wanted to try to do things as naturally as possible. I was so excited to finally make a friend. But little did I know, the friendship was one-sided. I tried suggesting that we hang out sometime and get lunch, but he always said he was too busy. Once winter break was over, I would see him from time to time, and he seemed happy to see me. What happened back in December of 2015 was the first time I ever got a taste of what I thought to be a genuine friendship. I wanted to do everything I could to keep it. On Wednesday, February 17th, 2016, I wanted to tell him I was on the spectrum to see if that could get us talking even more again. However, I did it in a unique way, which would ultimately proved to be my downfall. I basically asked for his advice on my imaginary cousin, Jason, who was on the spectrum, and how he met this student who he wants to be friends with, but he was nervous to ask because of how busy the friend was. He gave me advice for my cousin and talked about how people with autism are unique and have something special to offer. Those words right there made me realize that he wouldn't push me away for having autism, so I chose to tell him that I was Jason. However, this right here caused him to push me away. I know people are probably thinking that what I did was sneaky, and that makes sense that he was upset by it. The thing is, the Jason approach is something I've done quite often with others, as I wanted to see if they would be open-minded to getting to know someone on the spectrum, and normally it had success. Even though I know there were long-term benefits of having people know about my disability, it still isn't easy to talk about, especially back then. The Jason strategy was my way of slowly telling people about me. As the days went by, I could tell there was more tension with Mitch and me. On Thursday, March 3rd, 2016, I sent a text to someone I know about wanting to cause harm to myself. They did the right thing and reported it to my college. I can remember the social worker finding me at the area I was in at the time, asking me to follow her. She took me to meet a cop, and I was essentially put in the cop car and taken to Silver Cross Hospital for evaluation. I ended up leaving when they determined that I was okay, but it was still a tough experience. Anyways, out of panic and desperation, I spoke to the people that I knew from high school to see if they could reach out to Mitch to explain to him why I did what I did. I went as far as sharing his phone number to make this happen, but understandably, this made him more upset. It eventually got to the point where the school ordered me not to talk to him anymore because he felt harassed by me. This event was mainly facilitated by a man at the school who was the conduct coordinator, who was by far the least compassionate and harshest person I've ever met in my life. To this day, I have flashbacks of him speaking to me in such a harsh tone, not giving 1 ounce of validation to how I was feeling, and treating my panic episodes as annoying inconveniences. Ultimately, this led to me needing to go to an outpatient program for nearly a month and a half due to the fact that I felt depressed. I stopped eating to the point where I lost 26 pounds in less than 2 months. I also had thoughts about harming myself because of it. Even after the outpatient program, I refused to go back to that school due to the memories and fears of seeing Mitch again. This led to major arguments with family. I did eventually go to another junior college, which was much less stressful for me. To this day, I remember every little bit of this whole ordeal, and I relive it constantly. I don't blame Mitch for any of his frustration and how he wanted nothing to do with me anymore. I just wanted the opportunity to apologize, and at the very least, to get the closure of telling him that I meant no harm. The act of giving potential friends' numbers to people to call them and speak on my behalf was something that I was used to doing. This dates back to high school, and it was also usually good, at least at the start. As a full-grown adult, I completely understand how that seems very creepy and not socially appropriate. Back then, I genuinely thought it wasn't a huge deal. The worst part of this, as I sort of mentioned, is that I live my life every day thinking about what happened, thinking about how I'll never get to apologize, and thinking about how he will always remember me as the creepy loser that always bothered him. The story I retold is but a minuscule taste of negative things I constantly relive in my mind. But just for good measure, I will tell one more story. Don't worry, this one is not quite as long. Back in high school, the big thing I had to deal with was being too black. meaning my skin was too dark and I was made fun of by every different ethnic group in my school. I won't go in depth with that part specifically because I talked about this in my book, Success in the Middle. But I will say is this led to a situation that took place in junior year. On Tuesday, September 18th, 2012, an African-American girl, who I will name Bonnie, started saying ethnic slurs to me in cooking class. So I retaliated and said things back to her. We had a back and forth going for several minutes in whisper fashion so the teacher wouldn't hear us. Eventually, I said something back to her that struck a nerve, and she proceeded to get out of her seat and chase me to the corner of the room. Yes, I ran from a girl, which back then was a huge deal in the eyes of others. She tried to punch me, so I grabbed her arms to impede her from doing so. The teacher came and said, "Let go of her arm," repeatedly. I was trying to explain that she was trying to punch me and I was afraid for my safety. It didn't matter. The teacher said the same thing and threatened to give me consequences. Eventually, another staff came and held the girl's arms. Guess what I did? I immediately let go and ran out of the classroom as the teacher was screaming, "Go to the office!" Now, you think a scene where I was running away from a girl in front of a group of students would be enough to show that my holding of her arms wasn't with the intention of inflicting harm or trying to be tough and look cool? Nope. The dean didn't try to understand my point of view and just stated I should have let go. The girl got in trouble too, but I got in trouble for refusing to let go of the arms of a student who was trying to punch me. Bonnie herself admitted that she wanted to punch me to the social workers when he had a mediation. Hello? After this situation, the school called for an intervention to talk about my behavior and grades. But in large, part of the discussion centered around my not listening to the teacher and not letting go of Bonnie's arms. What a mess. The cherry on top with the situation was my classmates saying that I got my butt beat by a girl. And again, I have hundreds more of these horrid situations that I replay in my mind and that I relive. But I won't be able to tell them all. The thing about this curse is that it doesn't stop at me reliving the situation. It goes as to me creating hypotheticals. Those are the true pain. I touched upon this a bit in my last book, but I really want to give an in-depth look of what this means, what my mind does as it takes situations and forces me to relive them while adding what-ifs to the nightmare. What if the situation with Mitch landed me in jail? After the school asked me not to speak to Mitch, I tried my hardest to hide from him as much as possible out of embarrassment. What if we saw each other after that in the school? What if I saw him and ended up having a mental breakdown and he got even more infuriated with me? What if Bonnie ended up chasing me and tried to fight me in the hallway? What if the other teacher didn't come and hold her arms? You get the point. I don't just ask myself these questions. The hypothetical scenario has to replay in my head. I can't focus on other things until there is some kind of positive resolution in the end. And sometimes this can take as long as 45 plus minutes for a single hypothetical scenario. It is important to note that these are not just limited to my youth. I go through this process with situations that take place as an adult. Situations with coworkers, situations with students that I work with as an adult, situations with family, situations that happen with total strangers, situations that happen on TV that have nothing to do with me but I can never relate to, etc. The torment is real. Oftentimes, reliving these moments can really affect my mood and my day. This next statement will be discussed more later, but it's important to understand that these thoughts are not me just trying to relive in the past and hold silly grudges. This is legitimately how my mind works. Years ago, when I was undergoing therapy, I actually tried to take medication to help with this, but it did absolutely nothing. My breath mints had more of an impact. At least it made my breath smell nice. As stated, the acute memory has its perks, but at times, it is truly a debilitating and agonizingly painful curse.